Minister Seamus O'Regan resigns from Trudeau's cabinet, according to the Globe and Mail. No great loss, says Anna. No, I agree. Canada Proud says Trudeau Liberal Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan is set to announce that he will be leaving Trudeau's cabinet and will become the 16th Trudeau Liberal MP to declare he's not running for re-election. So bye-bye, Seamus. Thank goodness. And Petrified COVID Parent says he quit his cabinet post with zero notice, not even 2 weeks, and in the middle of several high-profile labor negotiations. This is perfectly normal, and I have no questions. Bye, Seamus. Michael Chong is highlighting this. Apparently, Minister Joly is in Beijing. Huh. The first such time the foreign minister has been there in nearly 7 years. I hope she raises Canadians' anger with the PRC messing around in our elections. That's just standard operating procedure at this point in time. They've been influencing our elections to the point of deciding leaders, and I'm sure influencing more, since early 2000s. 1997, Sidewinder was presented to Prime Minister Chrétien by the RCMP and CSIS, and he shelved it and made it top secret, and then they leaked it. You can look Sidewinder up. I've reported on it a bunch. So 97 at least. Like, I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm trying to say it's ingrained. Nobody's bringing this up. Everybody knows. Ka-ching, right? If you bring this up, man, your campaign's going to be starved of money. All that sweet, sweet Chinese money that gets you elected, apparently, right? So, I'm not holding my breath. Michael Chong says, 2 months ago, on May 3rd, Justice Hogan concluded this about what happened in the lead up to the 2019 election in the Liberal nomination in Don Valley North. This is the Han-Dong busing people in, and they say while the what says available intelligence respecting this reflects that a well-grounded suspicion that the busing of international students was tied to the PRC, given that the DVN was considered a safe Liberal seat, Don Valley North. This would likely not have impacted which party won the seat. It could have impacted who was elected to Parliament, right? That is significant. So the Liberals were going to win, almost guaranteed. It was a safe Liberal seat. If you can influence who wins the seat, then now it's your seat, right? It's not the Liberal seat, it's your seat, right? You understand? You control that seat, not the Liberals. So by winning the Liberal nomination, they control the seat with their ability to bus people in. Is that okay? And yet, again, standard operating procedure. Michael Chong, because people look the other way, because when they get elected, they do the job of the people who elected them, which was not us, right? Which was somebody else. And he's Michael Chong has a whole series of tweets talking about all of this. But again, this is long-standing, and I would be very, very surprised if Mr. Poilievre followed through and was able to stop foreign interference, decisive foreign interference that results in our elections being tainted to the degree where the government is not working for us, but working for either a patchwork of foreign interests or a singular foreign interest, the Chinese Communist Party, against Canada with people who are placed by the Chinese Communist Party into our government, right? Like, I'm very, very skeptical that somebody like Poilievre running the Conservative Party is able to do that because of how entrenched this all seems. Naya says she's starting to like Mr. Poilievre. I'm skeptical, as I just said, but Mr. Poilievre is saying all the right words. He says no more WEF, no more foreign-controlled anything, no more malarkey, basically. And so here's Mr. Poilievre. I don't know.
No staff, no ministers, no MPs in my caucus will be involved whatsoever in that organization. It is a group of high-flying, high-tax, high-carbon hypocrites who all got on their private jets to fly off to a remote ski village where they talked about how working-class people should not be allowed to heat their homes or drive their pickup trucks. I'm not going to work for a group of globalist billionaires who serve their own interests at the expense of everyone else. And I'd like to specifically point out Mark Carney. Here he was celebrating the central banks who caused the inflation by printing trillions of dollars so that people like multimillionaires like him could have their asset values inflated while the purchasing power of working class people and seniors was wasted away by inflation, a massive wealth transfer from the have-nots to the have-yachts. A common-sense conservative government will bring home control of our democracy to this country, and it's not just on that issue. We will ban the IRGC to end the interference of the 700 agents that are operating in this country on behalf of the terrorist regime in Tehran, and that's according to Global News. We will shut down foreign-controlled police stations. We will bring in a foreign influence registry. We will bring home control of our democracy, and we'll make this a country that works for its people, the common people, and the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. Thank you.
So there you go. He's saying we're going to just stop it all. We're going to stop it all, except for the dairy cartel, because that seems to be domestic. Government, they're different issues. The dairy cartel is something different than what he was talking about, to be fair. And so it's interesting that he's promising the world. Can he deliver? Right? I don't know. Chrystia Freeland couldn't deliver. She promised everything, and all we got was more inflation. And she said, don't worry, I'll print some money to cover it. And everybody kind of rolled their eyes because she was not joking. And gov.exe says there are now rumors swirling about Chrystia Freeland being fired as finance minister as early as tomorrow. I wonder what ministry she'll be put in charge of. It's going to seem insulting no matter which one it is. As Justin Trudeau calls a cabinet meeting for Friday morning and may look to throw someone else under the bus so he can keep going. So Mark Carney gets in through by-election and becomes the finance minister right away because all that central bank experience. We just recruit him, and who cares about the rules? He can become an MP, an appointed MP, because Justin Trudeau really needs him, and so does the country. We're drafting MPs now. No, so it's like that women's hockey drafting that men's player, right? Like, what rules? What rules? Where does it say the draft has to be women? It's women's hockey. So it just seems really, really strange, right? Here is the new head of the Canadian Armed Forces, and Canadian Independent highlights this. He says Canada's new Chief of Defence Staff, Jenny Kerrigan, who is officially appointed to the position today, this is yesterday, says she needs the real mainstream media journalists to help combat disinformation. I struggled to think what disinformation could be shared about this woman. What? I mean, like getting her position wrong, right? Like she's the Canada's new Chief of Defence Staff, right? So head of the CAF. She's one of the upper echelon people, right? She's one of the people who implemented all of the woke nonsense in the CAF, and now she's been promoted, and so this is going to double down. And now she's telling reporters who are all paid by the government that they've got to help protect real information from all those misinformation people. How could people do damage by misreporting on her, right? Like, she's 4 feet tall. I mean, clearly she's not 4 feet tall, but Chrystia Freeland's close, but she's a hobbit, right? But this person is sowing fear, sowing division, and completely baselessly. Absolutely ridiculous. Here we go.
You've been the target of disinformation campaigns that General Eyre mentioned. How much of that do you expect to continue in terms of trying to sway Canadians' opinions or undermine our institutions?
Well, I can expect. I think we should be expecting some of that, and I think we will need all of your help, you out there, the real journalists, to counter that.
You've been the target.
The real journalists who lie about everything, right? We need that to counter disinformation and misinformation about you. The whole thing is just ridiculous. Here is gov.exe again. He says, after Justin Trudeau said the post-war peacetime we've enjoyed for 80 years is over, Chief of Defence Staff Jenny Kerrigan says we have 5 years to prepare for threats from Russia and climate change, and Canadians must be ready. What are they trying to tell us here? So 5 years to prep for war with Russia? We're not going to win a war with Russia, right? That's less likely than Ukraine winning a war against Russia. And so are they trying to fill in backstory for a draft being necessary, right? Can you imagine if a draft was necessary in Canada? Here is this.
Chase with the Globe and Mail. Your predecessor, Wayne Eyre, talked about Canadians living in a more dangerous world than most of us have ever seen in our lifetime. I'd like to ask you about your thoughts on that And particularly, do you see that there's a serious risk that Canada will be drawn into an actual conflict in the next 5 to 10 years?
So, like many Canadians, we feel safe in Canada. We have historically. We have a great friend to our south. We have big oceans. We had a very deep frozen Arctic. And that has historically shielded us well from many threats. Not so much anymore. There are weapon systems that can reach the continent right now. The north is thawing, so we are much more open now to both conventional threats and unconventional threats all at the same time. So I think Canadians need to understand that if we are not ready, we might not be able to react appropriately in defense of them. Do I have a timeline? I have a bit of a timeline. I say we have about 5 years to get us close enough to be ready to counter those long-range type of threat. And then we are actively working with the NORAD, our NORAD friends, and our NATO allies to get ready for that.
The whole idea of this 5-year timeline, she doesn't sound credible. She's the person who destroyed or put the Canadian Armed Forces on the path to destroying recruiting. She's the person who brought in all the woke nonsense and saying, oh yeah, we're totally going to be on track in 5 years to counter all of these threats. Baseless, absolutely baseless. I don't see any evidence to back up what she's saying. So here is Liz. She's sharing this. This is a minute and a half talking about the taxes we pay. And he says, we live in a communist country already right now. So I don't disagree. We do pay a lot of taxes, probably way too many taxes. Here we go.
Canada's tax system is a criminal enterprise, sucking dry the $55,000 annual income of the average Joe. Trudeau and the talking Timbit pocket a combined $11,419 in income tax, while $3,957 disappears into employment insurance and the Canadian pension plan. Considering 32% of fuel costs in Ontario are taxes, a further $1,000 is seized from Joe and an additional $6,000 in property taxes. In total, Joe relinquishes $22,376 annually to the government. The remaining $32,624 is subject to a 13% sales tax every time he spends a dime, dwindling Joe's purchasing power to $28,380, or half of his annual salary. Essentially, Joe works 6 months out of the year as a slave to the state. And what does Joe get in return for this modern-day serfdom? A government that imprisoned him in his own home for years, coerced him into taking potentially harmful experimental pharmaceutical products, a healthcare system that ranks second to last among its peers, an economy spiraling towards disaster, as well as out-of-control crime rates and mass homelessness plaguing our streets. All of this courtesy of a cabal of traitorous bureaucrats who dream of eradicating private car ownership by 2030 and are actively pushing legislation that would throw Canadians in jail for daring to utter anything deemed hateful by their Orwellian standards. Tyranny isn't a distant threat, it's already entrenched in Canada's governance, eroding the freedoms fought for by generations past.
Yeah, nailed it. So I don't have anything to add. He's 100% right, and we should damn well pay attention to it. And we should stop it because they require our consent to do this. Kelowna now, we're not talking about canola oil. Kelowna now says Bonnie Henry's office defends her reference to white occupiers in the latest drug report. So this is a grab bag of governance. So it's all the stuff that's going on across Canada, et cetera, that doesn't really fit in anywhere else and is talking about our governance. And this kind of stuff, again, talking about the tax we pay for service healthcare. And these healthcare people are trying to give us drugs because white people are racist. And that's supposed to be completely unquestionable. And that's crazy town. The drugs report released by Provincial Health Officer Bonnie Henry last week has come in for plenty of criticism, including from Premier Eby. Most of that criticism has centered on Eby's main recommendations, including that the BC government should consider allowing people to obtain alternatives to street drugs without a prescription. But another aspect of the report has that rubbed some observers the wrong way is its use of language: white occupier and Canadian settler. The document, which can be read in full here, includes dozens of references to white supremacy, decolonization, systemic racism, and other terms associated with certain academic disciplines, as well as activist groups such as Black Lives Matter. It claims drug prohibition in Canada is based on a history of racism, white supremacy, paternalism, colonialism, classism, and human rights violations. The report mentions various historical events, including the Opium Wars, the head tax on Chinese immigrants, and the moral panic associated with the Opium Act of 1908. It emphasizes that BC's drug crisis has been exacerbated by the impact of colonialism and racism, and that the Office of the Provincial Health Officer is deliberately taking anti-racist and anti-white supremacy approaches to its work. So all of that is just to say they're normalizing anti-white racism within their work. A spokesperson for the OPHO told Now Media that knowing what our ancestors were is part of the office's devotion to anti-racism and truth and reconciliation. Having a person who's got a $50,000 salary, or even like a $100,000 salary, doesn't matter what the salary is, somebody like a bureaucrat, mid-manager working in an office somewhere, doesn't get to tell us, me, you, Canada, who our ancestors were within the context of their anti-racism lens. This is communist bullshit. It's not, oh, well, you were bad and we're just pointing it out, because that's the stance they'll take. And it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Like you can hear the attitude just in the quote. Carrying on, he said that contributors were given the opportunity to reflect on and share their understanding of their relationship to settler colonialism. Like, it's preloading the question so that you have to agree with them, right? There's no discussing the settler colonialism aspect of it. You have to consider your relationship to that. No, forget that. That doesn't exist. It's nonsense communist bullshit. Next. Okay, one of the subtle but powerful ways the settler colonialism is perpetuated is through the silence of settler people's relationship to these lands and territories. Bullshit. You know what I've noticed as well? I think that the government should probably weigh in on this, like the Ontario government. When I'm driving around, if I listen to the radio, and I don't listen to the radio very often because I can't stand it, I'd rather listen to a lecture, and I often do. But when I do listen to the radio, they are all saying, we're broadcasting from the traditional lands of blah, 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 blah. And like, you're not broadcasting, you're broadcasting from Guelph, actually. Like, you live in Guelph. This city's called Guelph. Stop changing the name of the city, because when you start using a different name for a place, then people start adopting that name, and then you've changed the name of the place. Istanbul was Constantinople. But they might be giants, right? But fundamentally, when you start playing with language like that, it's a form of attack. So if I was premier, if I had my druthers, then I would make that illegal. I'd make it a hefty fine. If you want to spend $1 million a day to virtue signal, no problem. But you'll be spending $1 million a day to fill the tax coffers of the Ontario government, and I'll be doing a tax reduction based on the amount in that coffer. So go ahead and say it, but it'll cost you, right? And the Canadian people will thank you because you're paying their taxes. So there you go. That's what I do. That's my first promise. After removing all taxes on energy and food. Never seen anything quite like this before. Surrey South MLA Eleanor Struco, who leads on matters of mental health and addictions for the Conservative Party of BC, said she was taken aback by the report's language, explaining that she's never seen anything quite like this before. This is a form of activism within the public service, she told Now Media, adding that she found the reporting's framing concerning and very, very political. Both her party and the official opposition, BC United, called for Henry to lose her job in the wake of the report's publication. She told Now Media that while she supports the right of individuals to freely express themselves, expectations are different for an institution like OPHO. I certainly am not a person who believes in canceling anyone for their own personal ideas, and I might not agree with, and I believe also in free speech. But when it comes to publicly funded documents and reports, I think that they need to be politically neutral and secular, she said. We need to be having things that would have a broad appeal because they truly should be serving all British Columbians. Addiction, she insisted, doesn't have any barriers in terms of our ethnicity, our background, our sex, our age, our gender, our expression. It can affect anyone. To root everything in history and historic events like colonialism, I think takes away a little bit from a lot of the scientific research that's out there, she added. We have the Stanford Lancet report, things that argue that more drugs, the more drugs, the more easily available things like opiates are, the higher the rate of population level addiction. This is a political framing of a social problem. Of course, I find it concerning just to see a report framed in this way. It's very political. Yes. So all of that is to say, white supremacy and the moral panic about white supremacy and colonialism, it's all just a way to backdoor communism into everything, inject communism into everything, right? And it's quite successful because people play along. Like, oh yeah, I guess bad things did happen. Yeah, bad things happened in history. Did you do it? No? Well, then it's not our fault, right? It's not Canada's fault. Canada has done, as a government, a whole lot to rectify historical, missteps and things like that. And it's never enough. So, I think it's probably time to just solve our problems like potholes and, homelessness, but not let's bring in millions of people from the third world and put them up in hotels while Canadians remain homeless. Not like that. Let's actually fix homelessness if we've got all these hotels and money, and not import all of these people who are needy. Rebel News, moving on. Rebel News is reporting the self-described leading Canadian organization for LGBT people promised to close its X account on July 18th, citing a lack of censorship on the platform of people who dare to disagree with Eagle. So yeah, I responded to one of their things where they were talking about something. Oh, I think it was Jessica, right? And I was laughing hysterically and saying, like, Jessica's a man. Like, you can't be a man and play in women's hockey. Men can't be women. It's that simple. And that apparently is too much for Eagle. So apparently this is crazy town. Western Standard is running this. Poll says Nenshi would be premier if election held tomorrow. Because they steal it. And I said, I still don't believe this result. Here's somebody saying, look, this is the guy who did the poll. It's not lost on me that the last provincial poll that came out shows very different numbers. We do our dead level best, and this is why we do only conduct live calls. We balance that with cell phones and landlines. We have sample size that try to reduce the margin of error as best we can, and we're only taking it to live people. These aren't online surveys. These aren't interactive voice responses. And he said that it's also quite common for a party with a new leader to enjoy a bump in the polls. So I still don't believe this. I still don't believe this whatsoever. It's one of those things where it's an outlier poll. It's not something that everybody's reporting. It's such an outlier poll that people don't believe it. And he's saying, no, it's real. It's for real. Our methods and everything are real good. I still don't believe it. And what's your game, Danielle Smith? Danielle Smith says, I sat down with the legendary Jordan Peterson to discuss Justin Trudeau's attacks on free speech. The Liberals echo extremist policies, climate alarmism, and the future of our conservative movement. And yeah, sure, I guess. But I have questions for both of these people. For Jordan Peterson, I would say, if you studied tyrannical societies, and you referenced that you did often, and you referenced that you studied Hitler's Nazi Germany, why did you read Mein Kampf? And if you read Mein Kampf, what do you think about the fact that it was basically an economic book that outlines exactly what is happening currently in the West right now, economically? The similarities are unavoidable. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how close it is. And for Danielle Smith, why are you playing the carbon game? Why are you playing the carbon game, man? What's your game? What's your game, Danielle Smith? Goodness gracious me. We've got to talk about COVID very quickly. Apparently, the Court of King's Bench Alberta says an ABKB judge has dismissed a lawsuit against the Alberta government, ruling that COVID-19 restrictions did not constitute negligence, malfeasance, or defamation without evidence of bad faith. Read the full decision here. And I basically say, you know you're wrong and the people know you're wrong. Traitors. And apparently it's under appeal, so they could very well be wrong. But they are wrong, regardless of how the appeal comes back. Our institutions are corrupted. Our everything is corrupted. And unfortunately, that's just how it is right now. Canada Proud says, is this the right decision? BC Conservative leader John Roustard has just announced that as part of his plan to end BC's healthcare shortage, he will rehire doctors and nurses who have been fired by the NDP over their personal medical decisions. It is inconceivable that we are still limiting the ability of doctors and nurses in a healthcare system that is in full collapse. And I say that fully believing that I don't think that the healthcare system in Canada can be saved. It doesn't matter how many Filipino nurses we import. It just doesn't. We are in a situation where the money that is being sucked out by useless bureaucrats and all the rest of it at the top for running the hospitals and the hospital administration, and the money that's being given to nurses and doctors and the restrictions on the hiring there, it's a disaster. It's a disaster that's compounding. And the more it compounds, the more the system fails, and it is failing, and it's wild. It's absolutely incredible to watch. And people love Canadian healthcare to the degree where they will look past the failures, and that's, again, incredible. Because like hallway healthcare was 10 years ago, and people say we're going to fix the healthcare. Yeah, bullshit, Doug. So Everybody's lying. Nobody's actually solving any problems, and they're stealing all of our money and giving us a pittance and pretending that that's just fine. And it's not. It's absolutely not. I think that the healthcare workers should be rehired, and I think that the people the NDP, who ideologically limited the employment prospects for people who have body autonomy, their bodies belong to them, not to the NDP. Those people should have consequences. The NDP themselves, or anybody, not just the NDP, anybody using the state to coerce people to take anything against their will. What an awful nightmare. Bernie says net zero. The lunatics are at the wheel. This is England. Yikes. This is Ed Miliband, and he's the guy who I was telling you yesterday, who approved what they didn't think they were going to approve, solar panels on agricultural land. And he was like, oh yeah, definitely. The biggest problem is we don't need to eat. We need electricity from that farmland. Here is Ed Miliband. The United Kingdom is aligning with Canada for climate zealotry. Here we go.
The biggest threat, Mr. Speaker, to nature and food security and to our rural communities is not solar panels or onshore wind. It is the climate crisis, which threatens our best farmland, food production and the livelihoods of farmers. This government is not going to proceed on the basis of myth and false information, but evidence. Every time the previous government ducked, delayed and denied the difficult decisions needed for clean energy, it made us less secure, raised bills and undermined climate action. Mr. Speaker, no more.
No more, right? So they're going with net zero, and net zero is degrowth. Have you read the Club of Rome? Or excuse me, the Committee of 300? This came across my desk a few days ago, I guess. I added it to CanadaReport.co. If you're interested, the link is in things I'm watching just at the top there, Committee of 300. But it describes exactly what we're going through. And the plans for this were drawn up in the 60s and 70s, if not before that. But these people, the Committee of 300, honestly, just go listen to the first hour of this, double time. It won't take you long. I listened to the Trump thing this morning. I woke up early and it's an hour and a half speech. I listened to 2.5, which is a little fast for me, but it worked out pretty okay. So anyway, listen at 2 times speed. The first hour will blow your mind. I've had multiple times where I'm like, holy cow, we're living this right now. Here's just a little short excerpt.
NATO institutions in a one-world government. Natural resources would have to be allocated under the auspices of global planning. Nation-states could either accept Club of Rome domination or else survive by the law of the jungle and fight to survive. In its first test case, Meadows and Forrester planned the 1973 Arab-Israeli war on behalf of the RIIA to sharply bring home to the world that natural resources like petroleum would in the future come under global planners' control, meaning of course, under the control of the Committee of 300. Tavistock Institute called for a consultation with Pecky I, to which McGeorge Bundy, Homer Perlmutter, and Dr. Alexander King were invited. From London, Pecky I traveled to the White House where he met with the President and his cabinet, followed by a visit to the State Department where he conferred with the Secretary of State, the State Department's Intelligence Service and State's Policy Planning Council. Thus, from the very beginning, the United States government was fully aware of the Committee of 300's plans for this country.
Okay, further than that, he says that basically the Committee of 300 penetrates the cabinets and owns all the governments. He says at the beginning of this book, like earlier than the 45 minutes, within the first 45 minutes, he outlines that Henry Kissinger was a Committee of 300 Club of Rome member, and the United States was fully aware, and degrowth is net zero. The whole, everything that they've planned in this book, everything that they've planned, we're watching the rollout right now. Go read it. It's so crazy. It's absolutely bonkers. It's so crazy that it's just right there, that most people just won't believe it. But we're living it. Like, you cannot believe it, but also look at what we're living through currently. So it's wild stuff. Go read it. Go spend the time. It's worthwhile. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful